Hi, this is a UNCG Pedagogical Poetry Society video, and I'm Elena McCarrion. Today we'll be talking about villanelles. The villanelle is an incredible poetic structure. Like the ballad, it's a musical form, rooted in a history of folk songs and dance. In fact, the word villano means peasant and recalls the sort of everyday folksy tunes sung out in the fields, from where the form originates. And truly, the form is musical. It's full of these repeating refrains, much like the chorus of a song. Before I talk about the strict conventions of the form, you must hear what the poem sounds like. The repetition makes it memorable and so fun to memorize. I'm going to start with a Sylvia Plath poem, Mad Girl's Love Song, because it begs to be heard aloud by the ear before being read or tried to be understood. It's a poem about insanity, but also about heartbreak, written when Plath was only 20 years old, but to my mind, it has all the haunting power of an age-old chant. Mad Girl's Love Song by Sylvia Plath. I shut my eyes and all the world drops dead. I lift my lids and all is born again. I think I made you up inside my head. The stars go waltzing out in blue and red, and arbitrary blackness gallops in. I shut my eyes and all the world drops dead. I dreamed that you bewitched me into bed, and sung me moonstruck, kissed me quite insane. I think I made you up inside my head. God topples from the sky, hell's fires fade, exit seraphim and Satan's men. I shut my eyes and all the world drops dead. I fancied you'd return the way you said, but I grow old and I forget your name. I think I made you up inside my head. I should have loved a thunderbird instead. At least when spring comes they roar back again. I shut my eyes and all the world drops dead. I think I made you up inside my head. So the mood of this poem is so powerful that it compels us into this certain, almost obsessive headspace. The constant repetition of the two lines, I shut my eyes and all the world drops dead, and I think I made you up inside my head, traps us in this sort of neurotic round and round dance that we can't possibly escape. We are stuck in a pain that can't seem to resolve itself. Perhaps because of this cyclical returning and returning to pattern, the form is fantastic for conveying certain emotions like lovesickness, grief, and death, pains that, when they've hit you, seem never-ending, inescapable, and impossible to make sense of. And while the repetitive form certainly creates a sense of being trapped, I most admire villanelles for the way that they also provide a way of forward movement, a way of thinking and rethinking about something, of seeing the same issue or same lines in fresh ways as the poem evolves. Okay, so we can see here that the poem is made up of 5 stanzas of 3 lines, also called tercets, while the very last and 6th stanza has 4 lines, also known as a quatrain. That last stanza smashes those same 2 refrains together for the sort of punch of finality. So we see in the very first stanza here that it's a sandwich. This first line and the last line of the stanza are going to be what alternates over and over through the rest of the poem. And then again, at the very end, we see them return, only this time they're not sandwiched, they're right smack together. As if this wasn't a strict enough set of conventions, villanelles also stick to a very tight, repetitive rhyme pattern. It's ABA, 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 ABAA. So we see here that all the first and last lines rhyme for the entire poem, but also that all the middle lines of each stanza rhyme with each other. This is almost a childlike rhyming that adds to the sort of incantation effects of the poem. The constant repetition of the same sounds over and over does have sort of an almost childlike feel. And finally, I want to say that while this form is extremely repetitive and can at first glance seem monotonous, this genre is also one of the most flexible and plastic and changing of forms because it makes us see each line in multiple and changing ways. With the villanelle, although the refrains we open with are word for word identical to the refrains we end with, they're also transformed so that in a sense they are not the same two lines by the end. Villanelles teach us with each occurring line how to read those lines and how to see the same theme not necessarily differently, but with new complexity, weight, and resonance. Now I want to talk about teaching the Villanelle form. One of the things I love most about teaching Villanelles is that they make great writing assignments. At first glance, these might not seem like the most natural sort of assignment to give a new poet because it is so complex. It's far more strict in form than, say, free verse or narrative verse, which allow a lot of play. So it might not seem like the most natural start, but I've found that practice with these formal elements really instills an appreciation and respect for effects that form alone can achieve. Another reason I think this genre makes a great assignment is that once the two repeating lines are written, nearly half the poem is already complete. So it's sort of like a puzzle filling in the blanks that I think people like experimenting with. So once the framework is laid, they have to mostly just fill in the middle lines. In this way, the genre is somewhat accessible, even as one of the hardest forms, because students don't need to worry about meter and too many shifting rhyme schemes. They can just focus on sort of delivering this message in changing ways. In fact, I've found that offering these tight restrictions can actually be really freeing for a new poet to not have to make quite so many decisions. I always teach the art of losing Mad Girl's love song and Do Not Go Gently Into This Good Night to demonstrate how repetition as a formal element is so closely tied with the poem's themes of coming to terms with hardship. Often this coming to terms with is telling oneself as much as telling another. So with things like death, heartbreak, and loss, coming to terms with these things is never an easy feat, and it's never achieved all at once because grief returns in cycles and needs to be processed in different ways. One last reason that I love assigning villanelles is because we have many, many drafts of Elizabeth Bishop's One Art, which is my favorite villanelle. I've attached the packet below, which is a selection of some of the drafts from sort of the beginning, middle stages, and end that I give to my students. And this really opens up a discussion about how truly terrible poems are when we first start writing them, and yet we can see sort of the nuggets in the very early drafts, and how in their very early drafts these repeating lines begin to appear and resurface over and over as if they're unable to be squashed, insisting to be heard, and it sort of just emphasizes what we've been talking about, how the repetition and the insistence of the ideas that come through. So this exercise shows students that difficult forms are difficult for everyone, requiring dozens of drafts even from the masters. And yet, perhaps because it is so difficult, the payoff is massive. This couldn't be more evident than when we read villanelles by Dylan Thomas, Sylvia Plath, Rothke, and Elizabeth Bishop, which are fantastic poets, but to my mind, their villanelles are their masterpieces, and I really think that this form just opens incredible teaching opportunities for memorization, for writing assignments, and also are just sort of a really compelling way into hearing a poem, as well as sort of having an embodied experience of the poem. So if you see below, I've attached some of my favorite poems to teach, some of the drafts of Elizabeth Bishop, and thank you all for watching.